New CNN polling released just this morning shows a race that is truly neck and neck among likely voters in key battleground states. Harris holds a lead over Trump in Wisconsin and Michigan. In Arizona, Trump holds the lead. In nearby Nevada, there's no clear leader. And in what are arguably the two most critical states, well, it's a tie. There is no clear leader in Georgia, and it is dead even in the must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Well, despite the ascendancy of Kamala Harris and despite Donald Trump's insistence on essentially sabotaging himself at every chance he gets, the 2024 presidential race, as it stands today, is still a ridiculously close race. Nothing makes that clearer than the polls that keep coming out. Nothing makes that clearer than what the polls say about these critical battleground states. And for now, it appears to be anyone's game, and there are only 62 days until election day. So the candidates aren't in agreement on the state of the race, which is kind of funny. Now, Harris is openly acknowledging that it's gonna be a close call, while Trump is, well, why don't you see for yourselves?
I can't believe that that's going to be a close election. You know, we're leading in the polls, and it looks close, but I think in the end, it's not going to be a close election.
We are the underdog in this race. And we have some hard work then ahead of us. But here's the beauty of us in this room. We like hard work. Hard work is good work.
So, the last several presidential races have been pretty close. So Trump saying, I can't believe this is a close election, is kind of funny to me because presidential elections seem to be closer and closer. I mean, the polling leading up to the 2016 election, if you were focused on the national polling, which I think is always a mistake, then you would think, oh, I mean, Hillary Clinton's gonna beat Trump easy, no problem. But it always comes down to the battleground states. Like those are the states that really decide the election. And so let's talk a little bit about that because CNN's poll specifically studied 6 battleground states, but there are 2 in particular, which you heard earlier, that will be especially important for the race to 270 electoral college votes. So here's more on that.
We have talked so much about that blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And as you noted here, we're seeing Harris with slight leads in Michigan and Wisconsin. And so instead of our focus for the next 62 days just being on those blue wall states, I really think you got to go down the side of the East Coast, that Pennsylvania, Georgia, we'll see. We don't have North Carolina in this set of polling. If that is acting like Georgia, those states may be the ones to determine. And it's because, as you noted, Donald Trump has to have everything, just hold everything he had in 20, flip Pennsylvania and Georgia, he's the president again. And so if Harris can win one of those states, that's a huge block that she puts up in the path for Donald Trump and sets her potentially on a course.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
Oh, it's too close. Like I wouldn't bet on this election at this moment. And I know that there's a lot more excitement on the Democratic side of things now that Kamala Harris is the nominee rather than Joe Biden. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is gonna be a cakewalk. And I'm happy that Harris realizes that. I'm happy that she still sees herself as the underdog because I do think that Donald Trump, despite what Democratic voters might believe, is a formidable opponent. You know, if you're a Democratic voter, you're a hardcore partisan, you look at Donald Trump and of course, to you, it's easy to underestimate him. I would say it's a massive, massive weakness to underestimate your political opponent because the race, again, always comes down to the swing voters, independent voters, people who are not hardcore partisans, who are not loyal to one party or the other. These are individuals who can be swayed. And so when you think about the issues that are top of mind for American voters, and particularly these swing voters, they're concerned about the economy, they're concerned about immigration, and you should look at how they feel about Harris and Trump, how much they trust these two individuals on those critical matters. And so let's talk about that, okay? On average, 15% of voters in these 6 swing states say that CNN polled, of course, say that they have not decided on who they're gonna vote for, just 15%. So that 15% of undecided voters in these 6 swing states, those are the individuals who are gonna decide the election, okay? And so those Americans have some strong feelings about very specific issues and who they trust more to tackle those issues. Economic issues, which posed a notable weak point for Biden, remain the topic most often chosen by voters when asked what matters to their choice for president. An average of 39% of likely voters across states choose the economy as their top issue, with protecting democracy next at an average of 25%. I think that that's telling, because it shows you why Biden's one and only strategy to win re-election was so ineffective. I mean, the only messaging we really got from the Biden campaign was, we gotta save democracy. Well, if saving democracy isn't the most important issue to these swing voters or to voters in general, probably because they're not buying the notion that Trump is a threat to democracy, whether you agree with that or not, that's what they're feeling. Well, get off message and talk about something that actually does matter to them. And clearly the economy is top of mind. Harris, by the way, now trails Trump on trust to handle the economy by relatively smaller margins than Biden did. So that's good news. Across the current polls, Trump is more trusted than Harris on the economy by 8 points on average. And by the way, I think that Harris is doing her best to try to earn more trust among these voters when it comes to the economy. Later on in the show, we're gonna talk about her latest economic proposals and how they would benefit small businesses. She talked a little bit earlier about what she wants to do to help ordinary Americans or help Americans in buying a home. Now she's coming out with some proposals in regard to entrepreneurship and how to help spur small businesses in the United States. We'll get to that a little later. Now, in the New York Times Siena College polls of the 6 swing states this spring, the same calculation, by the way, yielded a 20-point Trump advantage over Biden, really emphasizing here that Harris is closing that gap to some extent. Trump maintains a broad advantage as more trusted to handle immigration, which really shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, he has kind of taken ownership of that issue and has, I guess, stronger messaging on it. So voters think that he would tackle the issue a little better than Harris would as it stands today, but that could change. Harris has built on Biden's lead as more trusted to handle abortion and reproductive rights. I mean, I should hope so, with women across these 6 states preferring her by an average of 27 percentage points on the issue. By the way, Trump's wavering on that issue and the flip-flopping on that issue is pretty gross, because it really highlights how politicians see something that has a very real world impact on people's lives as nothing more than like a toy, a little prop to throw around. Just go along with what the polling is saying. Who cares? Who cares about the consequences for real human beings? So I don't know what Trump actually thinks about abortion. He just kind of goes with the flow and goes with what he thinks is gonna help him get elected. In the meantime, he's the man responsible for appointing the Supreme Court justices who aided and abetted the reversal of Roe. And that has led to a lot of pain, a lot of suffering for women and for families in some of these red states that effectively have abortion bans. So it's not a joke, it's not a game, and I think we should expect more from our politicians. When they use these issues that have an impact on our lives, a real impact on our lives, and our ability to have families, when we have families, when we decide to have children, I mean, they're showing us who they really are. It shows that it's all about themselves, it's all about their own personal power. It's not really about improving the lives of Americans. So I don't know what Trump is doing, right? Oh, I'm gonna vote in favor of the referendum in Florida that would set the abortion standards to what they were under Roe. Then he gets backlash from the right and says, never mind, I changed my mind. Okay, who are you and what do you represent? What are your principles? What are your values? Anyway, all right. So the swing state voters are also more likely to describe Trump as having clear policy plans to solve the country's problems, but also more likely to describe his views and policies as so extreme that they pose a threat to the country. All right, and then there's also a massive gender gap. I don't want to feed into this narrative because I don't want a battle of the sexes in the country, but the abortion issue has made gender and sex a big part of the electorate and their voting habits here, right? So let's talk about that. Here is more on how this is kind of turning into a men versus women issue and how men and women are likely to vote in this election as a result of issues like reproductive rights.
If you look at likely female voters across these states, you see enormous margins for Harris there. I mean, look, in Wisconsin, that's
55% is a landslide in our closely divided
politics. So she's
politics,
plus
right?
17, she's plus 16, she's plus 15. Those
David
are
Challian
huge.
is doing math on live television, everybody. No, this is like an awesome feat. We love it.
But show the other side, because among likely male voters, it's big advantage Trump. This is what we mean by the gap. When we say gender gap, it's not just the advantage among female voters for a Democrat, it's the difference between the female voter advantage among Democrats and the male voter advantage among Republicans. And you see what a big advantage that is for Trump among male voters.
So look, it's important to keep in mind that women are still very much motivated to get out the vote because of the reversal of Roe, which I think is super, super interesting here. They are registering to vote in extremely high numbers. They're outpacing men in new voter registrations. So that is good news for Harris, but she still trails Biden, or how Biden was doing in support among people of color. And I'm talking about Biden from 2020, not how Biden was doing in this recent electoral process. So support for Harris has grown by 13 percentage points among black voters since Biden left the race in July. Combined results of journal polls in late July and August show she is still 10 points behind Biden's 2020 mark, though. Harris has also gained 13 points in Latino support, but lags behind Biden's 2020 mark by 6 points. Now, that could be because those voters feel that they're no longer represented by the Democratic Party, or that the Democratic Party hasn't really been listening to their concerns. But I have noticed a difference between Harris and Biden in how Harris is carrying out her campaigning. She isn't really distancing herself from Biden, but she is coming out with policy proposals that differ from Biden's, which I think is interesting. And she seems to be tackling the issues that voters are most concerned about head on, whereas Biden was nowhere to be seen. And that was a huge problem for Democrats in winning re-election. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, the race is still too close to call. I wouldn't bet any money on it, but you do have Harris, refusing to underestimate her opponent here. You have Trump wondering how the election could possibly be this close. You do have two very different candidates, but look, at the end of the day, we live in a very divided country, unfortunately, like divided partisan-wise, even though a lot of us agree on the same issues. And so it doesn't surprise me that the election is close.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.